Hello and welcome to Horseplayers Happy Hour. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you in downtown Saratoga Springs at the Walt Whitman Brewery. I'm even wearing the T-shirt to rep my friends here. They do such a good job. One of my favorite places to be out and watching races. We've done a lot of work for one of the charities we're going to be talking about a little bit later today, the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation, who are the beneficiaries of the contest that will be happening in the background today, along with the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance. First and foremost, got to bring in the co-host on these shows, and he's been getting a lot of nice messages based on the work he did on these airwaves and elsewhere last week when he picked the 19-1 winner of this year's Del Mar Oaks. He's on a tremendous run of form. We'll see if we can keep it going today. He is from the Matt Bernier Show and his work on NBC TV's Matt Bernier. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, Pete. It's nice to, at some point connect with a nicely priced horse, and hopefully we can talk about some other interesting prices coming up this weekend. I know we're going to dive into the winning your in races as well as the forego. But talking about just this day in general, I know you're up in Saratoga. Here on the sort of North Shore of Massachusetts, it feels like fall, unfortunately. It feels like the tides have kind of turned.
Same.
I think the high today is like 62 and rainy. It's not a very nice day, and it's got that little nip in the air. It feels very October-esque, which I like October, but I love the summer. So a little bit bittersweet right now.
We'll get our Indian summer in, I can guarantee. And one good thing about the fall is it does make me think about the Breeders' Cup. You mentioned we'll be talking about the two win-in-your-in races a little bit later on. I'm excited to get to gab about those. We should probably do a quick contest update. Now, we had a little bit of something going on, Toga contest. We liked it for two reasons. One, it was evocative of the old school pick six, which ran from races 3 through 8. And of course, six-pack happy hour. I need another. I didn't mention one of the most important things about Walt Whitman before, by the way. The beer is delicious. And I have an order in via my phone. We should be good. But anyway, so this happened where we're going through an extra race. We're just going to do a lean and mean hour today. We've done some marathons on these shows, staying on an extra half an hour because Gary Stevens popped in, that kind of thing. Today, we're just going to do from 4 to 5 Eastern. We do have the next race in the contest about to go. And Matt, I know you're participating not only in our Horseplayers Happy Hour, but also in some other qualifying events over on horseplayers.com today. So I'm going to let you take the lead in this one and tell me who we should be betting.
Obviously, it's a little bit difficult with the off-the-turf races and things like that, but it can potentially present some value and some opportunities. And I thought this was an interesting race. It's not a super strong opinion. I'm thrilled with the price on the number 3, Gone Glimmering here. First off the claim for Joe Sharp's barn, most recently was a winner, ran in a non-winners of 3 lifetime for Tom Amos. I get it. It's not easy to move a horse up off of a great barn like Tom Amos's, but at the same time, I like the fact that this is a horse who is more or less proven on the main track, has got a little bit of ability as far as tactical speed is concerned. The wet track form has only tried it one time, and I kind of feel like that's the unknown for many of these horses, and I feel like you just by default have to upgrade any horses that have done any kind of running on a wet track and use that to your advantage. So that was kind of my logic here. The horse didn't run terribly on the only off-track go of it, has a little bit of tactical ability, and is a decent price here first off the claim. So 7-1 for me on the 3. It's not a strong opinion, but I like the price, and I'll take a shot.
I think it makes a ton of sense. I scratched into the 1A Little Red Frog, but, I had originally handicapped this race for the other service. So my opinion, not terribly interesting. Give us a little bit of an overview of where you are in this contest right now, and then we'll take a quick look at the leaderboard.
Well, so this is a very, very bunched leaderboard. It's been a relatively formful afternoon thus far at Saratoga. You haven't had anything too crazy happen, but your leader's at $22. And just for perspective's sake, I am in 23rd at $12.30. So, we've got a number of folks all sort of bunched up in that area. The top 8 are going to qualify for Saturday's $179 BCBC qualifier. So there's still a long way to go. We're not even halfway through yet. We're only 3 through these 8 races that you spoke about. Or 7, excuse me. And, Unfortunately, I think I'm a little bit formful outside of this race here going forward. So it would be nice if I could get a piece of this thing, even if the horse doesn't win. Maybe we can grab some place money, but it's still it's wide open at this point for anyone.
You've got the right price. I mean, this horse alone could take you from 0 to the lead. So we'll be rooting with great interest for you in this one as they're loading in the gates now. I'll run through the leaderboard really quickly. We have a name I don't know at the very top, Anthony Tremarchi, with that 22 that you mentioned. Jason Osterman in second, 1760. And now it's a whole brigade of 1760 players, including Brent Pollock, Hunter Archibald, ×2. Zachary Agamenoni is in that scrum as well. Paul Cavanaugh, Michael Cavana, Tyler Wisman, who's been so helpful with the redesign of the new In the Money website. Bruce Meyer, and then another familiar name we end up talking about a lot on these airwaves, your old castmate, Michael Bachok. So a good blend of familiar and new names up there on the leaderboard.
And we should probably, you brought up Mike Bachok, and his brother Ben, I believe, is playing as well. All the folks down on the Gulf Coast, fingers crossed everybody makes out all right. Obviously, it sounds like it was a pretty bad storm that went rolling through there and is still ongoing. So, hopefully everybody makes out all right in that.
Godspeed, absolutely. I saw some pictures that were fairly terrifying.
Yeah.
Haven't seen the latest news, but obviously our thoughts are with them. That was so terrifying all those years ago when the Katrina ripped through, and obviously a lot of New Orleans people come up here because of the racing connection and dealing with all the stuff they were dealing with back then. Hopefully we don't rise anything to that level. What's going on with your horse here as they turn for home in the 6th at Saratoga?
Yeah, I mean, tipping out into the clear. I don't think the horse is really picking it up too much, but at the same time, nobody's really opening up. So, I mean, the horse is still in with a chance, actually, on the outside.
Come on with this thing on the outside.
Come on, Treese, go on by.
Come on. The horse on the inside is finding, but let's see if we can get up.
I think.
Come on.
Get there.
Get your nose in the water.
Yeah, all right. I mean, look, that's right to the top at that point. That's going to be a $24 horse, $23 horse.
Yeah, using that. The rule of 3 can get messed up in short fields, but very often in contests, there's a lot more to it than this. But the quick and dirty idea is take that win odd and multiply it by 3, and that's very often the amount of points you're going to get. You're in fuego, my friend, and you know what? You got a little drift there late. This one closes at 11-1, and with my horse running second and the entry running out, 3 to 5 entry running out, you're going to get a place price. You're going to get more than the ×3 on this one.
Yeah, I mean, all told, like I was saying, probably 23, 24 for the win. But like you said, to get the 3 to 5 entry out of the money, I don't even think they hit the board. Oh, no, they didn't. I mean, they were last and second to last. So all of these, your gimmicks are going to pay giant. But to your point, I mean, even if you had Little Red Frog, you're still going to get a pretty healthy place price, I would imagine. Is it crazy to think you're going to get $8?
You could.
It
just depends on how much they tilted the pool on this thing.
Right.
This entry.
So I mean, look, this is best case scenario for me. Bruce Meyer, who has been a listener to all of our pods and is a great handicapper in his own right. I know Minnesota. I believe Minnesota based. I know he does a lot up at Canterbury. He had this horse. Bill Duncliffe had this horse. Nice. Robert Little had this horse. Nick Sievers. And then me and another one of my castmates, Lee Davis, he had this horse as well. So we should all be in pretty good shape after this horse comes through.
I would think so. Well, we'll get that info soon. I'm sure we'll check that out with great interest. Let's wait. We'll chat a little bit more generally. We'll get this leaderboard update, and then I think we should start previewing races a little bit. We've got a lot of good action going on this weekend, including those win and you're in races. So we'll get that going. Now, suddenly you've gone from being worried that you had just a little contest theory question for you. You've gone from being a little bit worried maybe about having chalky picks the rest of the way to probably being okay with it, I would think. Is that your mentality when you're in this spot?
Well, I think because it's kind of one of those things. And look, I'm always one of the folks, and I say that I'm pretty chalky. Actually, in the finale, I think I've got a pretty decent price. But for the most part, you're right. I mean, once you get into a position like this, it's never a bad thing to necessarily have a likely win contender. If at that point, nothing else, you're just trying to pad your bankroll. I always, we've talked about it with Jonathan Kinchin in the past. I don't know if it's a right or wrong sort of theory, the way that I look at these sort of races. I'd like to have some sort of a price toward the end of the race, just in case there's a chance where either A, I'm behind, or B, I can kind of protect from anybody trying to stab at the end and come and catch me. I don't know that that's necessarily going to play out here this way this afternoon, but to your initial point and your initial question, yeah, I mean, this is definitely, it went from being a little bit of a potentially problematic situation to being an advantageous one.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and I have often heard that theory about having the price to either get back into it or potentially block. But I think in the real world, it all comes down to the old Paul Sherman theory of playing who you like. And I would say this, though, if in a late race, and I mean, I think this is true of most races, if you're torn between the two, if you're torn between a likely winner and a price horse, typically in a contest, especially late on, I'm going to be inclined to go for the price. I mean, that's logical, isn't it?
See, and I think there's a sort of a line of demarcation. I'll go back to Michael Bachok. I mean, who knew that he was going to get so much air here in the first 10 minutes of this? But I'll never forget, I believe we were down in New Orleans at the fairgrounds, and we were playing in the contest, and I ended up missing out by a couple cents here or there. But Mike had brought up something where his sort of philosophy at the time, and who knows, maybe it's evolved, and I think everyone should be doing that in time. The more and more you play, if you think you need to alter your strategy a little bit, that's what good winning players do. But he had sort of laid out the theory or the concept of, for the first half of the contest, play who you like. It doesn't matter what the prices are, whatever the case may be. Play who you like, and then assess halfway through. And this is also talking about sort of a live money event as opposed to, or I say live money, a live contest format as opposed to pick and pray. Play who you like in the first 6. And then for the last 6, that's when you can start to sort of play the math game a little bit more, because you know where you stand, what you do or don't need. But I think you can even apply it a little bit to the pick and pray format, where play who you like, who you think are the most likely winners, or whatever the case may be. You think you're going to get value for the first, let's use this afternoon as the example, for the first 4 races. And then for those last 3, maybe you try to get a little bit more creative for either the reason of you're in a good position where you're ahead of folks and you want to prevent what they've been coined stabbers at the end, who they just throw random stuff out there and it connects. Or if you are in that sort of position, unfortunately, where you're behind the 8 ball and you do need some prices to come through, maybe it ends up working out that way. But yeah, specifically, we were talking about the live format, and Mike had brought that up, where for the first half, play what you like, play who you think is going to win, and then factor in the numbers over the latter half, for better or for worse.
I think it makes sense. I mean, for me, yeah, just to clarify for those that don't know, so the live format, you can change your picks up to the off of every race, and the pick and pray, as the name implies, you're doing everything before the first race. And there's advantages and disadvantages to both. People playing in a lot of contests all the time typically prefer the pick and pray. I feel like, especially for new players, the live formats are really fun because you get the opportunity to play that game within a game and get into the game theory. And I think of it a little bit like exotic betting strategy in terms of, I'll take that short price at more or less at any point. Well, not at any point. For the first, I'd move it from 50% to like 75% if that's where my strong opinion is and I don't think it's an open race. But if it's an open race, the kind of race you'd spread in exotic betting, at that point, those are the races where, and again, really in that case, wherever they come up, I'm happy to reach and try to get a number in there, because I just, I want to try to be like fishing, using the right bait in the right pond for the fish I'm trying to catch. You know what I mean? I think being able to move races into those 3 categories: formful, bombs away possibilities, formful, and then a mixed outlook, and then catering your strategy to how many of those races are in this given sequence and where in the sequence they are. I think taking it to that next level is probably a good idea, and one that I'm sure you've employed in your successful contest career.
Well, and going back to your first point that you brought up for maybe new players, new contest folks that are, giving things a look, maybe you will end up finding that pick and pray is really what you prefer of the two. So you can avoid sort of the stabbing idea at the end of it. But I do think there's some value in at least getting comfortable enough to recognizing what those circumstances may present, where, you know what, if it turns into a math game, that's one thing, but you also have to factor in, okay, let's say there are 3 horses who would be cappers. You also need to factor in, well, how many folks ahead of me are going to be playing this cap horse as opposed to this one? And while we've talked about it, called kind of the overcap horse, where there can potentially be added value in a horse that, okay, well, they're not 20 to 1, they're actually 40 to 1, but some folks may be a little bit swayed away from a horse like that. So inherently, you actually, because there are fewer people playing the horse, you're actually gaining value on that sort of thing. So I agree with you. I think it's one of those things. You may end up finding whatever your style is, whatever your preference is, that's all well and good. But I would still strongly encourage, especially new players, at least try a few live events, a live format anyway, just to work that muscle a little bit, just in case. Because, I mean, look at it. The NHC, National Horseplayers Championship, that's a live event. So, you know, to just go in there blind and not really know how the game is played, I think is a dangerous sort of proposition. At least try to cut your teeth a little bit. So if you are in that position, you know how to react.
I think that's very good advice. And either end of the odds spectrum, there's this important idea of trying to get points that others don't have, because within the ecosystem of the contest, that provides value. We saw this in JK's contest heyday. His ability to pick up points with favorites. It's not like he only played favorites. That's a myth that I enjoy perpetuating to make fun of it. But the fact of the matter is, it's a fantastic strategy, because he will take those short prices that he's a very good intuitive player, and if he truly believes they won't lose, he'll take them, and other people are guessing and picking horses they don't really like. And, you know, at the end of these contests, very often it comes down to a few cents, and so those extra points you can pick up that others don't, incredibly valuable. Same thing with the overcap. Right? When I did the research for the winning contest player, had certain players. I mean, it's in the book. I'm not really talking out of school. And since we've been talking all about the Horseplayers castmates, I believe it was Kevin Cox who said, you know, why do I want a horse that's a 40 to 1, has, you know, the implied probability chance of a 40 to 1 shot when I'm only getting 20 to 1. So his inclination, as with many players, was to eschew those type of horses. Whereas when you pick one of those, so many fewer people will have it within the ecosystem of the contest that actually provides outsized value. So there's hopefully folks were interested in going fairly deep down the contest strategy rabbit hole today, because that's where we've gone. But hey, it is a contest, and I just think there's so much fun and value. Like, there's people listening who don't play contests and think, oh, I don't know, maybe it's not for me. Try, like Matt said, try it out, and you have a great opportunity on a site like Horseplayers or its sister site, Horse Tourneys. You get involved, you get action all day for a fixed cost, and you walk up the ladder in these things to events like the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. You have a chance to make a potentially life-changing score. Look, there are things about contests that there's certain formats or certain contests that I wouldn't necessarily advise playing in for complicated reasons we don't need to get into here. But this is a very cool club to have in your bag if you're a horse player, and things are definitely worth people checking out.
And the last thing I'll say, as far as, you know, contests and strategy and things like that are concerned, you know, I'll never forget, there was actually a flight. I was coming back from the West Coast, and I was playing on my phone while watching it on the TV on the plane, where I recognized that I was in a position where a cap horse would have put me over the top as far as the leader was concerned. The problem was, I recognized there were also probably 3 or 4 people ahead of me that were going to be doing the same sort of thing. So I kind of admitted defeat and said, rather than go for that, let me take a horse that I actually like that's more 4 or 5 to 1 and try to get my breakage, try to get my money back. And I did that. I ended up taking a 4 to 1 shot who ended up winning the race. So I acknowledged that, look, I'm not going to get the top prize in here, but I ended up getting the breakage of $400 or whatever it was. And to me, that was better than a stick in the eye. So I love it. I think that's also something, just because you're not going to look, not every day is going to be your day, but you can have those instances where, all right, you did well enough that maybe you can end up either getting your entry back, or in some instances, depending on how the breakage goes, you can actually make, 2x or 3x on whatever your buy-in was, despite the fact that you didn't actually win.
I love that idea, and it actually harkens back to one of my favorite contest memories when I was doing the work for the winning contest player and was in a big money event, and it was at the end, and I just thought my chances of being blocked in the last race of a contest were so high that I ended up like taking some 2 to 5 Baffert shot to like I was drawing dead on the win by doing it, but ended up getting second or third and a significant payday that like put me into the black for the meet. I remember Walt Whitman Brewery wasn't here at the time, so it was Henry Street Tap Room where we had the little victory party, and the drinks were on me. So I admire that cheeky,
and look,
play the favorite and move up the ladder strategy.
It even works for an event like the BCBC, which this is mainly the reason that we're here. Obviously, a feeder to try to get into the feeder for the BCBC. If you get down to the very end of it, let's just say you get to the Classic. And, okay, maybe you're not comfortable betting $10,000 to win on X horse. Maybe you bet $2,500, the horse wins. Sure, you're not going to get top prize, but maybe it moves you up that rung, that ladder where I'm making it up. Instead of running 15th and getting a whatever seat there is, maybe all of a sudden you move up to 9th. And not only do you get a different seat, but you end up making an extra $5,000 off of it or whatever it may be. I think those are always things to just keep in the back of your mind, where we all want to win. We all love winning, but you can also further your position and improve your position, as PTF is one to say with some of the horses, So I think it's just something, always keep it in the back of your mind. Winning, we all like to win, but you can still improve your position a little bit depending on what the circumstances are.
Yeah, there's a lot of game theory that goes into it. It's just one last point to make, because we are here in large part because of the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. Just this idea of playing your money through the context of that contest to be able to participate in the prize pool. And, if you're going to be betting big money anyway, there is excellent value in that contest because of that opportunity to cut some more of that money out of it. All right, let's do this leaderboard real quick. You basically already did it for me by just mentioning who had the horse. So Bruce Meyer, who we know, Bill Duncliffe, who hosts the Can Do podcast, does a fantastic job on that. Robert Little in third. Nick Sievers, who you mentioned, is in a tie for fourth with some guys named Bernier and Lee Davis. And then we've got Mark Winland in seventh and eighth. The eighth and final qualifying spot right now is a multi-way tie. So that'll be a fun scrum to follow between Daniel Edwards, Mark Troxell, Stephen Meyer, and John Benke. So, and previous leader Anthony Trimarchi gets busted back into 12th for the minute, but looks like he has some horses that aren't covered by other players. So still very much a chance to get in there, advance to the qualifier on Saturday, which you can also just buy into for $179 and try to punch the ticket for this year's Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge.
PTF, and before we dive into it, it's also worth noting for those of you that may look at the standings and wonder why Daniel Edwards is ahead of Mark Troxell and Stephen Meyer and John Benke. It's because he has one show to his credit as opposed to the other three gentlemen. So that's why that's sort of the tiebreaker in a position like this, the amount of shows that you have outside of your win place, obviously. So that's why right now, if the contest were to end, Daniel Edwards would actually be in while the other three would be out.
Not a fun way to lose, but
no.
Horse racing is good at providing those. Let's talk about some racing, Matt. Let's go out to Del Mar to start things off, to the Grade 2. It's the Pat O'Brien today, isn't it?
Yes, Pat O'Brien, 7/8 of a mile.
Exactly, 7/8, a race that was a Grade 1 for many years and still often attracts Grade 1 level competition. And I'm very curious. You've already tipped your hand that you had something up your sleeve in this one. I was interested. I mean, I really liked the race in the Bing Crosby from Law Abiding Citizen, just from a racing flow point of view. Horse went pretty quick early, and obviously this was a race that was falling apart late. I didn't see, in terms of early pace figures, that much to go with him. I think Law Abiding Citizen is worth at the very least a long look in this spot. But I mean, it's no layup. There's a lot of ways you can go. How did you see it?
I agree with you from a pace standpoint. I think Law Abiding Citizen is going to be the pace setter in here. The big thing that concerned me with him, and I've long liked him. I liked him early on as a 3-year-old. I'm a little bit concerned about the 7/8. I just don't know if that's maybe pushing it a little bit for him. I could look like an idiot for saying this here. I think Vertical Threat could smash this field. And on numbers alone, he's not fast enough right now. But he's so lightly raced, and he's going to be the kind of horse for the folks that like to watch tape. Because when you watch the tape for him, I get it. He ran against 4 horses in that little restricted stakes race most recently, and he only ran against maidens in that run 2 starts back at Los Al. He never looked like a loser at any point in either of those races. He had a little bit of a bobble in that Smiling Tiger, but he's the kind of horse to me that gets me excited when I see these types, because look, whether win, lose, or draw, whatever the case may be on Saturday, this might be one of the last opportunities to get a big number on a horse like this. And I think he's going to be pretty darn close to that 8-1 morning line that they've hung on him, simply because of the names and the experience and the races that some of these other horses have run in the past. I could look like a complete dope here Saturday night when the race is all said and done. I think this horse could not only win, I think he could smash this field.
And we've already started working on a long-term solution, so we don't have to deal with that happening again. I told you it was going to be a lean and mean hour. Well, there might be a lean and mean 50 minutes after that, but that's okay. Matt Bernier is still here with me. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. We're about to go for the 7th race at Saratoga today. But we also want to talk about, because I don't know exactly at what point we lost y'all. Let's talk very quickly about the Pat O'Brien happening out at Del Mar this weekend. Matt, I know you have a strong opinion in this one. I'll let you start things off.
Yeah, I'll just go down and dirty with this. If you're a figures player, he's probably not your cup of tea. I think the number 6 Vertical Threat, he's a 3-year-old taking on Elders. He's 8-1 on the morning line. I think not only could he win this race, I think he could smash this field. And I don't mean that as a slight to the other runners in here. I just think the sky is the limit for him if you're a tape watcher. If you're someone that likes to watch replays, you're going to fall in love with this horse. If you're someone who is strictly a figure player, you're going to look at it and say, A, he's not fast enough, and B, he's not classy enough. And I respect that, and I could look like a dummy on Saturday night after the race is over. But I think this could potentially be the last time you get any kind of real price on the number 6 Vertical Threat. I'm all over him in this spot.
Being a 3-year-old, being very progressive, what do you think this horse's ceiling is? Do you think he could go on and win this win-and-you're-in race to the Breeders' Cup Sprint and go on to be a major threat there?
I'll tell you what, he's not, here I'm saying he needs to improve. He does, but it's not as though he's slow right now. I mean, this is a horse coming in with a low 90 buyer already in his pocket. He's only raced 3 times in his career. It would not stun me at all. He goes out for good connections with Richard Baltus. It wouldn't stun me at all if this ended up being a horse that lived in sort of that high 90, low 100 range. And if it's not the Breeders' Cup, maybe it's a race like the Malibu down the line as a 3-year-old when we go back to opening day at Santa Anita, assuming everything goes as scheduled. I really do believe, and who knows? Obviously you can get fooled by tape from time to time. But, boy, he has looked spectacular in each of his 2 dirt starts. And like I said, he's the kind of horse I get excited about, win, lose, or draw, simply because this is probably the last time you'll be looking at any kind of a double-digit price on a horse like this, or a double-digit payoff, I should say, on a Win Mutual. I'm all over him at 8-1.
I like the sound of it. It's very intriguing. For me, I tend to trust the numbers more than the eyes, but there's exceptions. And when price is involved, that's where the exceptions come. I'm not going to take a favorite that looks too slow, but when you're looking at a horse at a potentially big price who's progressive like this, and I think is also going to get a good trip, but there's one horse I think might get a better trip, and that's the one Law-Abiding Citizen coming out of that last race as a flow upgrade. I was wondering if this one couldn't just make every poll a winning one potentially in a race that our friends over at Timeform US code as lacking early speed. Do you think Law-Abiding Citizen, easy for me to say, is the most serious threat to your horse in this spot?
I think he's very clearly the controlling speed in here. I'd be stunned if breaking from the inside if he was not on the lead, if he wasn't, something clearly went wrong. To your point, coming out of the Bing Crosby, he did a lot of running to only lose by a length and a quarter, given the fact that the time. I'm not totally convinced that 7/8 of him being in that sort of 7-2 range when it's all said and done. And just simply from a numbers standpoint, I think the horse that I like, Vertical Threat, just flanks Law-Abiding Citizen throughout, and he'll take his chances around the far turn. If he can't get to this horse, Law-Abiding Citizen is definitely dangerous. But I think if you're a pace player, he is the horse that makes the most sense in here.
And that is my bias. So that makes sense for me. How about the horses we're going to end up at the top of the market in this spot? For me, I was just concerned about what kind of trips they were going to get. But do you think one of the favorites might be able to get it done?
I'm a big fan of Flagstaff. I loved him in that Triple Bend most recently, and then he broke a little bit on the slow side, which is more or less 2 starts in a row because the run 2 back in the Count Fleet, everybody and their brother saw this horse lunge in the air and come with that unbelievable run to almost get to Whitmore. Unfortunately, Whitmore just had the tactical advantage, and he's just a really good racehorse. The Triple Bend, I was a little bit disappointed in, but to be honest, you go back and watch that tape, it wasn't the cleanest trip. I thought Victor Espinoza had to wait quite a long time in behind horses. And when he tipped out, yes, he was a little bit on the flat side, but 7/8 of a mile is what this horse really wants. I wouldn't be surprised at all. To me, of the shortest prices, he's probably the most likely winner, slightly ahead of a horse like CZ Rocket. But again, if you're looking for a logical, understandable horse, I think Flagstaff makes the most sense. To your point, I'm not entirely sure what kind of trip he's going to pull in a race like this.
The workout tab is another factor in Flagstaff's favor for sure. Looking over that, so we'll see what happens out there in California in the Grade 2 Pat O'Brien, a Breeders' Cup win in your in race. All right, while we were talking about the Pat O'Brien, you got some good news, I think, Matt, over at Saratoga in the next race in the contest. You're in a good spot to hold position and win entry into Saturday's qualifier, and 3 to 5 introduced getting the job done probably helps. And did you say you had Peaceful in there? Did you pick up some place points as well?
Yeah, well, Peaceful was actually the horse that I was going to. I picked her on racingpicks.com if the race stayed on grass. Obviously, it didn't. And, she came out of a relatively soft trip in the grand scheme of things. And I thought she boxed on pretty well in this spot, but she was no match for the winner here in this spot. Introduced is a really nice horse here for Jorge Duarte's barn, who it feels like this is a filly or a mare at this point. I don't even know how old she is, but I think she's just as good on dirt as she is on turf. And I think that's why she ended up being 3 to 5 in this spot. I mean, she just made the most sense if you were just looking at it from an off the turf standpoint of what these horses were capable of on the main track. When you can make the argument that the horse is equally as good on both surfaces in an off the turf affair, those are the kind of horses that are going to be short prices and they're going to be tough to beat.
It's very, very well said. And you have elevated your position in the contest here. Now, Bill Duncliffe is in first from the Can Do podcast, 55.70. You're sitting second with 53.30. Bruce Meyer in just behind with 53. Robert Little, 51.50. Nick Sievers, 50.80. Mark Winland, 50.40. Lee Davis from the Horseplayers cast, 47.70. And Daniel Edwards holding the final spot that will win entry into this qualifier with a total of 43.90. 2 races left to go. 2 races left to still happen here at Saratoga today. We'll see. I'm not sure if we'll make it all the way to the next one. We're certainly not going to make it to the end today. We'll either hang around for one more or we'll do another 15 minutes. We'll see how things are progressing. But I think we should move our tack to Saratoga and talk about some of these stakes races that we have up here on Saturday. We've got a stakes-laden card for this day that would, it feels so funny to say, but would normally be Travers Day. That kind of like blows my mind a little bit, but that's 2020 for you in a nutshell. Not one of the things I'm going to be complaining too much about is having an early Travers. But why don't we go next to a race that is not only a Breeders' Cup win in your in race, but I think there are reasons to think it may have more of an impact on the Breeders' Cup this year than in typical years for 2 reasons. One, I do think while we're going to have some European foreign interest in the Breeders' Cup, I think it's probably going to seem just very logical that it might be a little bit less given the state of the world. But also the fact that there's no Arlington Million this year. I feel like there have been many years, where this race gets run on the same day as that, and obviously your fields are going to get a little bit diluted when that happens. But in 2020, this sword dancer really at the Grade 1 level feels like a race that could have an impact for the rest of the year. What do you think of this field as a whole before we dive into the specifics?
If I'm being honest, I think it's probably a Grade 2 field and running for a Grade 1 prize. And I think that's more an indictment on our long distance turf runners here in the United States this year more than anything. I don't mean that in any disrespectful manner. I just think these horses are, for what we are so accustomed to seeing from a proper grade 1 turf runner, I think they're probably just a notch or two below. And I'm going to do something very similar to what we did last week with the 4-star Dave, where I went through and basically said process of elimination led me to Valid Point, who he didn't run very well. But I think the logic was right. We had brought up Halliday, and I just wasn't convinced that he was necessarily grade 1 caliber. He got out to the front, and he ended up wiring the field. In this race, I'm a little bit more bullish while coupling it with the idea of process of elimination. I go back and I take a look at that Bowling Green. I thought it was a fine effort. Sadler's Joy, if you want to say he should have or shouldn't have been disqualified, it is what it is. He's rock solid. You know what you're going to get from him. He's going to show up. He's going to give you roughly a 100 buyer. Sometimes good enough. Sometimes it's not. Saratoga's not a problem for him. The big takeaway for me was I didn't really love the Bowling Green as a whole. I didn't really love the United Nations. And I want a horse who's proven over soft to yielding turf, which is more likely than not what you're going to get on Saturday afternoon up at Saratoga, coupled with the rain that we've had today. Tomorrow there's a chance of a thunderstorm, and Saturday it looks like it's going to be relatively wet. I didn't like him at all when he showed up last year for the Jockey Club Derby at Belmont Park. This is the number 7, Pedro Cara. He ran really well that day. Go back and watch the tape. That was a race that the top 3 Europeans, or the 3 Europeans, were the 1, 2, 3 finishers. And on form coming over, they didn't look all that good. But, I feel like that was just sort of a reminder that European turf form is just better than what we have here for the most part. His 2 runs in Qatar earlier this year, I don't want to hold those against him. Now he goes out for Graham Motion's barn. I think the big difference for me was the one race that he's had Lasix is far and away the best of his career. And then you take a look at it and say he's been here for a bit, and look at his form on soft or yielding or good soft type of ground. He's done really, really well. He just kind of was a standout to me in here. He's 10-1 on the morning line. Again, it's just as much about not wanting anybody out of the Bowling Green or the United Nations that led me here. But I think this horse fits. I went with the number 7, Pedro Cara.
It's funny, we have similar angles, and I thought we were going to be on the same horse for a second, the things you were saying, and then it switched late. But I can see it if I squint. I like Corelli in this spot, who I thought had a trip excuse in the United Nations. And this horse, to me, looking at the back form, it's not the group form that we typically see from our really good European runners, but this is really strong handicap form. And, just looking at some of the fields this one has faced and the challenges that he's faced over there. And I think coupled with the back class, this still relatively new gelding has a chance to do a lot better than the last day in a race that flowed to the front, had a little bit of trouble early, got out of position, ran on a little bit, only lost by a length and a half. But I just feel like maybe rounding into form and coming back to a good race. And I think this horse I'm really hoping we're going to get all of the 6-1 on the morning line with Corelli. Jonathan Thomas has not been on a hot streak, but is an extraordinarily competent trainer, as we've all seen with his body of work over the last few years. I wouldn't be surprised if he has this one ready to sing a pretty fine tune in this year's Sword Dancer in a race where I agree the ones at the top of the market, they're just a little bit they were a little bit unexciting to me at the numbers they're going to be. I can absolutely see throwing in Pedro Caro. Corelli, though, my definite top pick. Let's talk about some of these other horses. Aquaphobia, I really liked a lot in the United Nations. Was my top pick in there. Got a little bit, I don't know if it's lucky or I just saw that the horse was going to get an easy trip. But looking back at this one, I do have a little bit of last time was the time as regarding his chances in the Sword Dancer. What do you think of his chances?
Look, I feel like such a dope. I went on the Sport of Kings podcast with Scott Carson and Chris Larmy, and I had it narrowed down to the 2 makers in that race, the United Nations. And I went to Muggs-O-Matic simply because I thought he would be twice the price of Aquaphobia. And somehow the market flipped on its head, and Aquaphobia ended off at 10-1, and he won relatively easily. But I think to your point, you go back and look at that trip. You're not going to find a better trip on turf than what we had from Aquaphobia that day. It was a great ride from Joe Bravo. I just feel like now you're going to be looking at a fraction of the price of what you had just a few weeks back when we were down at Monmouth Park. Would it surprise me at all if he ran well? No, I just strictly from a percentage standpoint, I don't want any part of him in here at the odds he's likely to go off at.
Cross Border is an interesting item. This is a horse I thought was going to be on the lead in the Bowling Green, and I was sort of shocked and unhappy to see how far back he was early. Ends up putting in this furious run. We'll leave the specifics of the DQ aside. I think we've talked about that plenty on both of our podcasts. But this horse ran a really big race. I don't know. Again, I'm just left a little cold backing this one as potentially the second choice in this race. Timeform US has him projected on the lead once again. It'll be very interesting to see what they decide to do tactically. Where do you land with him?
Yeah, I mean he's fine, and I say that in the nicest way. He's fine. If someone told me that he was going to win, I'm not really going to argue with you. I'm going to probably push back on what kind of price I would take on him. He's going to be short because of what you brought up, the fact that he has good form coming into this race, the fact that he can be more forward than he was in that most recent start. I'm envisioning something closer to the trip that we had in the Manhattan than what we saw in the Bowling Green. I think he is going to be forwardly placed in a spot like this. I'm just, if you're telling me that he's going to be 3-1 as the morning line suggests, and I think David Aragona does as good a job as anyone, he just doesn't do anything for me at that price. I think he's fine, and fine for me is not good enough.
Yeah, I agree. Fine is not acceptable when you're taking a horse who's going to be short in the odds. One thing that's interesting is has the right combination of speed and finish to get a great trip once again. So for your multi-race exotics, I would probably keep Cross Border in the mix as a B.
We also can't blow over the fact that he's 5 for 5 at Saratoga. He's got a little bit of who was Linda Rice's horse that now is out on the West Coast for Richard Mandela. Oh, goodness gracious.
Voodoo Song.
Yes. He's got a little bit of that going on. He loves the track. But to your point, if you're playing any of the exotics, he's definitely one that you want to use. But I think you and I kind of are in agreement that just given the likely pace or a price situation, he's not appetizing.
Let's talk about Sadler's Joy. We're talking about horses that do their best work at Saratoga. He's certainly one of them. Look, at the end of the day, I felt like according to the rules as written, it was the right move to make the DQ. But this is a tough old horse who I always kind of root for low key, even if I'm betting in a different direction, just because I'm just a fan of what he's just shown his stuff for so long. He came through for me as a bettor on the day when I needed him most, back in that Travers Day pick 6 a few years ago, when he was the only one I had who was anywhere at the end and got up in the shadow of the wire. What do you think? I mean, it feels like if you were writing a movie script, this is the day where Sadler's Joy maybe gets his revenge.
Yeah, and so here's a crazy little tidbit. When I was going through looking at his lifetime PPs, he's won one Grade 1 amid all of his victories, but he's run 3rd and 4th in the Breeders' Cup Turf in his career. And I don't have any real data to back this statement up. If they choose to go to the Breeders' Cup with him again this year, Keeneland's turf can be a little bit funny. Some horses can get over it, some can't. I have no real reasoning. I think he's one that would handle it. And again, in a year like this, to your point, who knows who comes over from Europe because of the circumstances? Maybe this is the time where the ultimate moment for him, his shining moment where he can go and get all the money. As far as this race on Saturday goes, I mean, again, he makes sense. He fits for the reasons you've laid out. He just shows up time and time again. And if someone said to me 100 buyer is going to win, I would say he's the most likely winner because that's all he does. He just registers triple-digit buyers. He's a little bit of a difficult horse to ride, I think. You need to time that move very, very well. I think Javier has clearly gotten along with him quite well. Julian Leparoux got along with him very well when he was sort of the regular rider, but he's clearly got some quirks. I think the talent is still there at 7 years old. He's still got that big potent kick, and maybe he can make up for that little disqualification. Again, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's how it ended up shaking down in the Bowling Green. He deserves to be among the favorites for this race.
Yeah, I think he will. Do you think he will go favorite? I would think that all the attendant hype and the talking about the DQ and everything, I think they'll bet I think they'll bet this one down below where Cross Border and Aquaphobia are. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would say he and Cross Border are going to be relatively close. That would be my guess. I feel like he's probably the favorite. Let's say if I'm just spitballing right here, maybe he's 8-5, 9-5, and maybe Cross Borders in that 2-1, 5-2 range, and then you have sort of a little bit of a gap there to 7-2, 3-1, 4-1 types.
It feels to me like in terms of who could come out of this and make an impact in the Breeders' Cup Turf. I mean, you got to acknowledge Sadler's Joy just based on the form that he's already shown in that race. And then I think, we might be in the right direction with our outsiders as horses that maybe have that much more scope for improvement. As much as I like the Maker Triumvirate as horses, for me, it doesn't feel as likely that they're going to be able to go on and make an impact in a race like the Breeders' Cup Turf. Do you think I'm underselling them if they can? You see any reasons why one of them might step up here and then be able to step up again in a spot like that?
No, I mean, for no other reason than maybe this is just one of those years where, it's not the strongest group that we're going to see put together for this race. I want to sort of throw a curveball at you. One of the listeners and viewers of my show, Alex Kibrick, has brought up the idea. I've made no bones about it. I love Mean Mary. But if you're afraid of the mile and 3/16 and running into Rushing Fall again at Keeneland, who she's never lost at Keeneland, I mean, do you at least entertain the idea of running against the boys because you're going to get more ground, because it may be a little bit of a subpar group from what we're used to? I don't hate that idea.
I think Rushing Fall will run in the Breeders' Cup Mile.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that's just I don't know why I think that exactly, but that's been an idea in my head. But maybe Chad Brown wants to separate newspaper.
Oh, no, I see. I was leaning more about Mean Mary, where you're going to
I just meant that there wouldn't be a reason to. I was picking up what you were laying down. I just meant I don't think there'll necessarily be a reason to duck her in the filly and mare turf race.
Got it.
Mean Mary has been so impressive, and obviously ran a winning race the other day at a distance presumably short of her best. I don't think it's crazy. It also depends on who ends up coming over. But I mean, looking at this group of horses, I mean, what price would Mean Mary be in here? Arrested and ready, pointed to this race, Mean Mary be? I mean,
if we're being honest, isn't she vying for favoritism?
Yeah, I think so. So it's not crazy. Whether or not the team will want to take that chance is very much of an open question, especially if some of the Chad Brown killers, if multiple Chad Brown killers end up going mile instead of filly and mare turf.
Totally.
It's going to be interesting to see what chips over from Europe. I mean, that's really one of the big outstanding questions, something I have on my list to talk to Nick Luck about in one of our upcoming conversations. And speaking of Nick Luck and conversations, we want to encourage folks to stick around tonight because we're going to go off the air here in a few minutes. We've got one more race we definitely want to talk about in terms of the Grade 1-4 Go. But tune back in at 6 o'clock. Cocktails and Conversation tonight with Nick Luck and Brittany Urton. They do a fantastic job. And special guest tonight, Angel Cordero. I've done everything I can to try to get them to ask him to do his famous get the cork out of the bottle trick with a napkin. We'll see if they can convince him to do it. But Angel's a great storyteller, and I think he's going to be a great guest on that show. But anyway, this is all a long way of saying I think your idea for Mean Mary is very interesting, and I think it'll just depend on where some other dominoes fall in terms of what decision they ultimately make.
No, and I tend to agree with that, and it will be fascinating because to your point, and I understand the folks that bring that up, and I was just I threw it out there as fun fodder where, from a tactical standpoint, is the result any different if Luis Saez tries to open up as opposed to take that 25-ish second quarter right there where he gave her that nice breath, but in effect, you brought Rushing Fall into the race? Does it make any difference if you try to just spread eagle the field? Or do you look at it and say at that distance or a distance similar to that, you're just not going to beat Rushing Fall, whereas it feels like a horse like Mean Mary who has that ability to be more forward out at 1.5 miles, maybe that's a game changer, even if it is taking on boys. We'll find out. It's going to be very, very interesting to see. But I said it after that race. I mean, even in defeat, I still love her. I think she's super, super talented.
They both ran incredible races. You felt so bad for Graham Motion after, running second in the Diana to Chad Brown for the 19th time. It was somewhat hilarious in a sad way. As big a fan as I am of everybody involved, it's just you have to just sort of shake your head. But yeah, for me, I don't think it would have mattered. I talked about this with Sean Borman on the early week Players podcast, and we sort of came to the conclusion that by trying to open up, knowing that her game is more stamina than speed, I think she probably ends up just teeing it up that much more for rushing fall in that spot. I think where she can really show her best weapons is going a little bit longer and letting the stamina like properly come into play. But you don't know. I mean, stamina can come into play going shorter sometimes when you do exactly what you suggested and open up and make it a real test. But it's just looking at her internal fractions in previous races, I think it would have been a tough ask. I think me and Mary probably ran that race 100% optimally for her and just found one better on the day, the freak that is rushing fall.
And I don't want to, maybe this is going to be kind of a blasphemous statement to make, but she has hints of Highland Real to me, where you'll occasionally run into exceptional talents that are going to beat you. But you in your own right are pretty darn exceptional. And with the right circumstances, and I go back to the Breeders' Cup Turf out at Santa Anita with that sort of what it seemingly seemed like an overzealous ride where they opened up by 10 lengths or whatever it was down the backside at a mile and a half. He wasn't going to stop. He's the kind of horse that he's just got that he had that bottom. And I wonder if Mean Mary, maybe she fits that similar mold. But
I love it when stayers are ridden that way. I absolutely love it. It's such a myth that they all want to be held up. Let them go out there and just click off the same fractions and play a little bit of come and get me. We don't see enough of that in USA turf racing. And I love Mean Mary for it and hope you're right and hope that there are some, her grade 1 will be forthcoming. And
we saw it in the Derby, didn't we?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's if you can, and another example of a horse that seemingly didn't fit on form that goes out there, but totally unexposed and suited to conditions, and goes out there and just meets out even fractions, and the others can't get into it. It's something I wish we could see more of in USA turf racing.
I agree 100%. I think, again, we talk about it all the time. Speed is your greatest asset. It's your greatest weapon. Use it.
No doubt about it. I think we can go through this 8th race at Saratoga, Matt, unless you're in a hurry. I think we've got time to have a nice conversation about the Grade 1 Forego, and then we'll loop right back, talk quickly about the Saratoga race. We'll watch this and we'll get out, give everybody plenty of time to set up for cocktails and conversation. But let's right now talk about this Forego, racing at the Grade 1 level, another sprint at the Grade 1 level that, for what it is, appears to really not have all that much speed in it, which gives me a little bit of pause. Where are you going to go in this spot?
I had narrowed it down to 4, and to your point, I'm a little bit concerned from a dynamic standpoint if maybe the pace doesn't materialize for the horse that I ultimately landed on. I respect Whitmore. I think he's going to run big. I respect Funny Guy. I think I don't want to say the wise guy horse in here, but I feel like he makes plenty of sense stepping up from New York bred company into open company. And I think he's very versatile. I think he can do a number of different things. Complexity, to me, I don't want to say is the Captain Obvious horse, but his run in that most recent start was spectacular. He never really looked like much of a loser. And he has the ability, if this pace doesn't materialize, to be forward enough where he can take advantage of it. So I respect him. I think he comes down from that 4-1. I ultimately landed on the horse drawn just to the outside of him, and that's win-win-win. And again, the dynamics may not work to his advantage. He's a bit of a slow horse out of the gate. He's had a penchant for that throughout his career. He's just not the best gate horse. But I think you go back to that run that Complexity looked so impressive with. I really don't think the difference between he and win-win-win is as dramatic as the 2.5, 2.25 lengths would suggest, because Win didn't have the cleanest of trips. He moved up down the backside, and rounding the far turn, it felt like Javier was trying to find a place to put him, and unfortunately he was just kind of boxed in there for a bit, turning for home, and at the top of the lane, he eventually did find a seam, but he had to kind of bounce around a little bit, got through there, and kicked on nicely at the end. To me, a slight turn back in distance isn't going to be an issue, and I get it. You need to go back realistically to the Pasco, which which is only like his 4th lifetime start down at Tampa as a 3-year-old, to find a number that makes him reasonably competitive, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. He just needs a little bit of help up front. And he's run well enough on a wet track, which, again, I'm expecting to get on Saturday. I respect complexity. That would probably be my exacta 7-6 or 6-7. But because of the price and because I don't think there's that much different as far as talent is concerned, I went with win-win-win over complexity. You
make a compelling case for win-win-win. I do worry about being out of position and whether there's going to be enough to get this one all the way to the top. For me, excellent horse. I mean, I certainly had a note on the trip, as you mentioned. You also have to figure that race was sort of you have a horse as talented as this was in some ways meant to be a prep or confidence booster, and you can make a very logical conclusion that this horse is meant to run better today. Recent workout tab looks good. There's looking more at win-win-win. There's a lot of things to recommend. The only thing holding me back from a full-throated endorsement is my fear about the pace. The horse I like in here, and he's going to have to break better than, back in the Vanderbilt when he broke so badly he didn't end up competing. And then in the Bing Crosby, ended up walking out of there again. But Lexitonian has a ton of run and is not a deep closer, despite the way the race worked out last time. I think as much as I talk about the concept of racing flow and specifically the racingflow.com numbers, somebody might be surprised to hear me talk about a horse that was, I think on the last day, flattered a little bit by the race shape in a race that was falling apart late. But Lexitonian has that run and could be on pace figures right up there with any of these. And at a potential double-figure price, which maybe we're going to get, I agree with you about what a great morning line maker David Aragon is. No criticism to him here. I'm just thinking there'll be enough around this horse. It'll probably be a little bit lower than that, but I think he's going to take. I think he's got his shot and should be a square price. Can you see that one at all?
Yeah, 100%. And look, this is a horse who doesn't owe me a dime. I mean, I had him in the Chick Lang at $1,000,000 back as a 3-year-old. But to your point, I think to me the sign of a good quality racehorse is when things don't necessarily work out the way that many, let's say, lesser horses would need them to work out for you to be at your best. You can overcome that. And to your point, to me, Lexitonian is not a confirmed closer. For him to run the way that he did in Southern California, I get it. The pace was ballistic. But for him to rally the way that he did after, by the way, again, he scratched at the gate the week before. It's not like we're talking.
It looked awful, and then
yeah.
It had to be somewhat traumatic. Obviously, the horse was fine. He came back and worked well, which was really my angle for why I liked him the last day. But yeah, there's a history of issues here.
But I think he's the kind of horse, though, to that point where he's not a confirmed closer. He's a horse that can be up there. And again, if we are to believe, and I have no reason to suspect otherwise, other than maybe it's a grade 1, but I mean, we've seen crazier things happen. Doesn't look like there's a lot of speed in the race. There's no reason that he can't be forwardly placed, if not outright pushing the lead. I feel like he's just constantly been a disrespected horse. And don't forget this too, and this is a pet angle of mine. I'm starting to do my homework for the BCBC. I said it about the turf. I'm going to say it about the dirt. Some horses run at Keeneland, some horses don't. And I don't know why. Chad Brown told me that the turf, because it's a little bit sandier on the bottom or whatever the case may be. Yeah. Some horses get over it, some horses don't. Lexitonian ran an unbelievable race in the Phoenix last year to only lose by a half length. And you take a look at the horses he was in there with. You see Whitmore's name shows up. All I'm saying is if he runs well on Saturday, I wouldn't totally rule him out for a race like the Breeders' Cup Sprint.
I agree. I completely agree. And I mean, in some ways, I feel like if you can bake in the upside of, okay, gate issues over, new talent found, I think you could very much make that case. Let's talk about this race at Saratoga, though. We've just got 1 minute. We'll watch this one, and then we'll wrap things up. Some good ideas there on the forego. Hopefully our ideas can help some folks out there make some money. But what did you end up doing in this race, in the contest, and what are your quick thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super creative. I'm on the favorite here at 6-5, the 2 Texas Swing. I like this horse knowing that we were going to be dealing with a short price. You take a look at the form of the Tampa Bay Derby. Maybe it's not, historic form, but it's pretty darn good. King Guillermo came back and ran quite well down in Arkansas. Solo Volante came back and won his next start, and we know he's a quality racehorse. For his first time against winners, I thought that was a credible effort from him. And I'm very hopeful Johnny V is forward with this horse. Use the speed to your advantage. I don't think this is a great group, if I'm being honest. Perhaps your biggest threat is the other Pletcher, drawn just to the outside in the 3. But I just kind of felt like he's, to me, the fastest horse nearest the rail. Use your speed, break on top, and hope that you can wire the field. So I ended up chalking out in here. It's not a brilliant opinion. I went with the 2 Texas Swing.
I have nothing to add. That was my top pick as well, with the thought that the 3 was the one that might be able to turn Texas Swing over. While we have a minute, while they're running this race, Matt, let's talk about plans for next week. It is Derby week. I'm sure you have offers and opportunities coming out of the woodwork of shows to do, etc. Are you going to be doing anything special on the Matt Bernier show? What do you have planned?
I think it's going to be a very, I don't want to call it a cursory glance, because we won't have the field won't be drawn at that point, but it's going to be more or less, I mean, I'm making no bones about it. I don't really have any interest in trying to beat Tiz the Law. So if it's not him, then who? Who could you potentially draw conclusions to say maybe they can all be the one to upset the apple cart? So I'm kind of looking at it saying, oh, why? And by the way, I'm keeping an eye on the race. How are we in 4th?
Yeah, it was not the smoothest of breaks, but it almost seemed like maybe the plan for the stablemate to go to the lead?
Interesting.
I'm not quite sure. Pletcher's still in very good position in the race.
Yeah, I was going to say Todd's going to work out all right here. So it's going to be a cursory glance at the field. I know we're going to chat probably on Tuesday next week, going over the race, on Thursday next week, going over the race and seeing what possibilities there are out there. And I've got a couple other things going on, some interviews, and I'll be on ABR on Saturday. I think we're starting at 4 o'clock. It'll be myself, Dan Torgman, Bram Weinstein, and Ren Carruthers. We'll be going over anything and everything that there is Derby as far as the first Saturday in September is concerned.
That sounds fantastic. We're going to have a ton of stuff across the network. I am very much looking forward to that Final Answers show that we'll do as part of our RacingPicks.com podcast next week. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be doing a little more of a lifestyle show to kick off the week on Sunday, and live at the Brentwood. Going to be talking about how to throw a Kentucky Derby party, and we'll have some fun guests on giving their suggestions as far as that goes. Naomi Tucker is going to be chiming in as well on Talk Racing to Me. That'll be fun. She's also got a cool chat coming up this week where I'm sure they'll be talking all things Derby with Maggie Wolfendale. You can check it all out at InTheMoneyPodcast.com. And I keep telling people say, oh, you guys got so much going on. What's the best way to keep track? InTheMoneyPodcast.com/email. Sign up for our newsletter. We're sending out at least one missive a week where we're basically linking to all the content and having some cool new stuff as well. Would love if you could join us for Derby Week. Also some fun special offers if you like silly things like free money. So you can check us out over there in themoneypodcast.com. Our prediction was not very good here, Matt. We hit the I don't know. It's not. I usually call the inexact when you run first and third. What is it when our horses run last and second to last?
It's called the reverse exacta, where you run last and second to last. And you're right. This is the one race of the meet. I mean, Todd's barn has been really strong, and for whatever reason, these fellas just they didn't have it today. A 61 exacta, so 2-1 over 4-1. Danny California over Mischief Afoot. Might hurt me in one of my contests, but as far as our contest is concerned, I don't think, at this point, you never know. It's pretty tight, but I mean, there were
some bomb. You can't feel too bad with a 2-1 shot in a short field, right?
No, we had a few folks that had the 6, but I mean, they're far enough back, so I may end up moving down the pecking order. But if the top 8 get in, should still be okay after this race, and we'll see what happens in the finale. But
follow along with interest. Folks can check out the leaderboard if they wish over at horseplayers.com. Just click on leaderboards and select Horseplayers Happy Hour. In the 8th, Saratoga, Danny California gets it done for all those Red Hot Chili Peppers fans out there. This is a cool horse in truth, who I wasn't sure how would class up with the ones that I like, so I actually am embarrassed to say I left out of my top 3, but gets the job done for Joel Rosario. And speaking of jobs done, I think we're pretty much sorted out for this week, Matt. We'll be back here next week again which will be a lot of fun. And we'll be talking about Breeders' Cup win and you're in races. And I think we'll probably take a little bit of a look ahead to the Kentucky Derby as well on these airwaves. What do you think?
Yeah, looking forward to it. And not just that, I'm really looking forward to the Kentucky Oaks, because it could be, we talk about the Derby. I mean, they're all going to need to be 'tis the law, at least in the Oaks. If you're someone who just likes figures, there are 2 horses, and it could be a pretty epic showdown.
Looks like a heavyweight title fight in the making there between Swiss Skydiver and Gamine. I can't wait. Only a handful more sleeps till this year's Kentucky Derby, and then it will be full steam ahead for the Breeders' Cup. That's going to do it. We'll start off today by thanking producer Craig, DJ Unstable himself. He had to do a headstand and hold a fork to his unplugged toaster. He had to do something to get that feed back up and running, but the man managed to get it done. The show must go on. Thank you, producer Craig. Thanks, of course, to Matt Bernier as well, to Peter Rotundo and our friends at the Breeders' Cup. I didn't plug the charities enough today. A little bit of a host fail there. That's who we're doing this for, raising money for the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation and the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, who do the key work of accrediting these organizations and helping distribute money. You can look for their sites and donate. Hey, speaking of the Derby, if you want to do that as a charitable endeavor, trfinc.org/players. That's our website, our webpage we maintain in conjunction with the TRF. A $75 donation gets you a seat and a goodie bag over at Taverna Novo, another one of my favorite spots here in Saratoga, along with Walt Whitman Brewing, where I'm sitting now. We're going to be doing our Derby party over at Taverna Novo. That should be a ton of fun. We'll throw in a thank you for the team here at Walt and Whitman, who do such a great job. Check it out the next time you're in Saratoga. That's going to do it. This show's been a production of In the Money Media. Our business manager is Drew Coatney. Our chief creative officer is Jonathan Kinchin. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos. I can do